okay. But yeah, as far as like the meta or the state of DBD, oh god, it's so crazy. They went with so much with that like 6.1 update, giving killers baseline buffs, nerfing some of the slowdown. Like in theory, looked kind of cool, but then they literally added slowdown to the game that was way more passive, to where the killers didn't have to stop like just playing the game essentially. Like they could chase survivors and randomly kick a gen, and the slowdown just kind of does its own thing. And then they added eruption, or they like buffed eruption, so you can't do anything for like half a minute, and there's like no counterplay to it. Maps got changed a little bit, some of them got shrunk down, so 3 gen strats became a lot stronger. This was my concern too when they made these changes. I'm like, these are a lot of changes all at once. Like you're buffing baseline killer, you're nerfing some of survivors like best, you know, essentially basically decisive strike, right? As well as reworking dead hard. And killers actually have some really good slowdown perk. And one of the issues that I saw with that 6.1 update is barbecue. I'm like, they got rid of the blood point bonus on barbecue. I'm like, you know what that's gonna do, right? Most killers, like I would say probably 70% of killers ran barbecue and chili, and they did so more or less for the blood points. And passive, every single time they hooked a survivor, they would get into another easy chase because of the aura reading. And I'm like, what do you think is going to happen if the majority of people running barbecue and chili that are running it primarily for the blood points say, well, no point in running it anymore, it doesn't give me blood points. Well, when they hook a survivor, they aren't going to necessarily know who the other survivors are. They're not really going to be enticed or persuaded to run across the map to initiate a chase, because they don't know if it's going to exist. They're going to play closer to the hook. Now that it's a gen kicking meta, they're going to play closer to the gens near the hook. They're going to go kick a gen and go back to the hook. And I mean, that's literally what you have. You have a 3-4 slowdown meta with a lot of gen kicking, passive slowdown, sitting near the hooks, and it's not as fun for people. It's not engaging, it's not interactive. I mean, I tell you what, they increased their kill rate for sure, but plus also, so there was a dual, there's a side effect to that, right? So not only, and this is the one thing I don't think people really thought of. If you make killers stronger, right, which is what they did, and that's what they set out to do, and survivors already feel like they die a bit, because to be fair, you know, on average, it was like 2 escape, 2 death every game across the board. What do you think is going to happen when survivors feel like they're not escaping hardly ever now? If the killer buff is that strong, they're going to push gens harder. They're going to equip gen perks. They're going to push gens harder. Okay, well, if survivors are pushing gens even harder, and you know, now we have better survivor perks based around gens and skill checks and progression, like, what do you think the response is going to be on the killer side? Run even more slowdown. Tunnel and camp even more. And it just becomes this like never-ending cycle and circle of just pounding motors, right? Like that's what you have right now. In theory, maybe if they would have kind of done some of these changes over the course of time, like maybe a couple of the baseline killer buffs with a couple perk changes, maybe leave DS as like a true 4 to 5 second stun, it wouldn't have been that bad, but it was just way too much at one time. Another thing that people didn't think of, and I hated that they like gaslit people, and by they I kind of mean a bunch of like not really thoughtful, or I don't want to say killer players, whatever. A lot of people are like, oh well, an extra 50 seconds on gens really isn't that much, it's just 50 seconds total, 10 seconds per gen. And I'm like, no it's not. The minute you equip a slowdown perk that starts regressing a generator, it's no longer just 10 seconds, it's 10 amplified by your slowdown. Right? So what was an extra 10 seconds might be 14, 15, 20, 30. Because you're getting a bunch of slowdown on the generators. Hello? Are all the pallets over here used? Jesus. So not only do gens take longer, but it's not just 50 seconds. So you're running 3 slowdown perks, it's probably an extra 20 or 30 seconds per gen. Some gens that you would get done before that used to be 80 seconds might get all the way regressed down to 0, whereas in the old update they would have been completed. So it's not, it was too much. It was too much for, I think, one update for people to really get used to and comfortable with. So now people just kind of play the most lazy sped way possible on both sides. So it's hard for people that kind of just want to have fun and flashlight and mess around, because we try and cling to that play style of just kind of like messing around, lights, getting off gens. But the minute that you do that for too long, you can kind of throw the game, because if you don't get gens done fast enough and the killer decides to try and tunnel somebody out or camp them out, you don't have the right setup, you didn't get enough gens done because maybe you tried to hover for a save, they can just end the game right there. The game can be over just like that. It teeters much more on like a knife's edge than like old DBD. I was with a friend the other day, 12k hours between the two of us, and lose with 4 gens up to something. Yup. That'll happen a lot, especially if your randoms are kind of the weak link too. Like you can't, like assuming the killer has a decent build, you can't die. You can't have somebody die with 3 gens up. You just can't. You can't. Sometimes you can't even have them die with 2 gens up. You just can't afford it. No, I know what you mean. I try and say the same thing. It's not really about the escape. It's just about feeling helpless. It's about feeling that you know, because that person got tunneled out and there's still 4 gens left and the killer has hook pop and eruption and call of brine, you already know how the game's gonna go. You feel like there's nothing you can do even if you wanted to try and escape. That your best play to escape is to play for hatch. Or if you like chase and you like to get chased by the killer, well, the killer's just gonna tunnel the weak link out and then what? Bloodlust you through every pallet because he can afford to? Like, there's nothing being lost in a chase with the killer when they make mistakes if they already have 1 person dead. A lot of what kind of irritates people in DBD, and they're not really vocal about it, is the predictability of games, I think. Knowing in the first like minute that a killer has 3 or 4 slowdown, and you know their perks, you know what the killer is because obviously you see them, and they're trying to tunnel somebody out, the whole game is already laid out in front of you. And it just becomes like a war of bashing your head against the wall. It's just not fun. Doing the same generator 4 times, yeah, it's a fun simulator. If you run slowdowns, that's part of the thing too. A lot of people say if they run slowdown, it feels too easy, but if they don't run slowdown, the gens just fly and there's nothing they can do and they get like 3 chases. Which, like, you can't blame the survivors, you know, like, I get it. And in some ways, I can't really blame the killers for just running super serious builds. Like, I get it. Like, I get it. I literally get it. There's not much you can do on either side. You know, it's funny, if someone's that new to DBD goes to YouTube and puts in a good killer build, they're all, yeah, I know! That's what I've been saying! Literally, you go to YouTube, you search best killer build, and no, I'm not trying to blame, like, certain creators, because I think maybe, was it Ots? There was a creator, it might have been Ots, where they just suggested like the same build back then. It was like hook pop DMS, blah blah blah. It was the same build on every killer essentially, and they're like, this is the best build for like every killer. And it's like, great, so that's what people are going to see when they go to YouTube. Great, that's what I want to see. No, that's not healthy for the game. Like, and realistically, you listen, and I think Scott Junn has a good point on this, and I think he's right for the most part. The best builds in the game aren't ones that consist of 4 slowdown perks. Like, having an info, aura, or chase perk, or 2 of them, oftentimes is better than getting 4 slowdown, because like with 4 slowdown, sometimes there's overlap or slowdown that doesn't really get you much value a game. It's better to rely on a couple consistent slowdown perks and have your other ones be information or like chase perks. I think you do especially like if you're an M1 killer, you need like a chase perk, IMO. Yeah, right, that's the problem. When you know the game's over, you kind of just give up. Like, that's the issue with the meta right now, is it's pushed the game to the breaking point of, on Survivor, if you want to escape consistently, you have to bring certain perks typically and play a certain way and stick to gens and not really like go for saves. You have to be very, very efficient with macroing and microing your time. And the same thing on killer. If you want to be consistently winning or win like 100% of your games, which some people do, it's silly. You got to run a certain amount of slowdown. You want 100% of your games to go like 3 or 4Ks, you need to run like 3 or 4 slowdown. You can't even give a chance for that one game where you're not running any slowdown and you play against a good team. You'll just lose. But that's the thing, though. That's one thing I think a lot of people don't really take into consideration, is that you don't need to win all your games, right? Like, if you're fine 3 or 4King like 70-80% of your games, and you're comfortable with like the amount of time and chases you get in those games, then your build is probably fine regardless of what you're running. But you also have to realize that maybe you don't run a lot of slowdown, and every now and then you're going to have those games where the gens get done in 3 minutes, you get 3 chases, and you hardly get any hooks. But you know, what's more worth it to you? I don't want to slam gens either. And it kind of goes, like, every day's a little bit different. Like, maybe I'm playing to escape this day. Maybe I'm, like, off stream and I just want light saves. Maybe I'm just trying to get points. Maybe I just want chases. Obviously, like, when I'm streaming, especially if I'm solo queuing, I've already pretty much submitted I'm gonna die, right? I don't really care about escaping. I just want to have a good game. If I die and the killer like never chases me because they tunnel a random out and they find the weak link and the baby survivor and they get him out of the game ASAP, obviously I didn't have fun. The shit was boring. That happens a lot too. I think that's the issue. But then it kind of just goes back into like the predictability of what you expect to happen in a match. You just expect to load into a game, see 3 slowdown, probably hook pop and eruption, and you expect the killer to at least be smart enough to find the shittiest survivor and tunnel them out of the game. Also, I'm not, in all of this discussion, We haven't even talked about 3 gens. Dude, half the maps have 2 gens spawn on top of each other. Like, any killer with any power can just contend with a 3 gen. And like the predictability of them just humping the 3 gen, knowing where they're gonna go. And the problem is too, for whatever reason, they're making these 3 gens spawn in the middle of the map. Like the choke points, the obvious spots. Behavior, how about you make like the most traversed areas of the map not contain 10 generators? How about that? Like, let's spread them out a little bit. High traffic areas shouldn't have the bulk of the gens, and they shouldn't be that close. There's only flaw because people will do shit like take a chase across the map from all the gens. Yeah, right, exactly. And that's part of the thing too, is killers also will put themselves in a bad chase running to completed gens or to strong loops, and then whether they abandon the chase or not, halfway through they've already wasted too much time. And people will be like, oh, strong loops, they got so many strong loops. It's like you ran to a loop where the gen was done, aka shack, and the shack pallet was up, and it was connected to a somewhat decent pallet, and you're an M1 killer. Like, you're not playing to your strength. The state of the game is in an obvious spot, and I think, again, it all kind of goes down to how predictable each game is played out. A lot, I mean, I guess you're gonna have that though, right? Like, to a certain extent, you can't get away from the predictability of DBD, because if you play it for thousands of hours, you're gonna see a lot of repetition. 90% of the game shouldn't go the same way. I was trying to bring out the... No, you're fine. It's just nice to be able to have a combo with someone who doesn't go right into it. No. And like, obviously I'm a little bit more survivor biased, I guess. I understand the issues that some killer players have, and like their annoyances with the game, and like, I understand that games can go fast. And they can have like really fast games, and it's really boring. But if the killer player base didn't have the tools that it had, I don't think the survivors would have been pushed to that sort of play style. I don't think they'd be pounding motors as hard if, well, partially that, and behavior has created some dumbass generator tools. No, but you're fine. I don't mind talking DBD, and like, I mean, that's, you know, discussions like that can be put up on YouTube and stuff too.
That's it, the end of the song. Next time you'll sing along. Trust me, there's nothing